And thank you for joining our briefing on the City of Philadelphia's response to gun violence. This briefing is for press only. If you are not a member of the press, please log out and watch today's press conference. We will be posting it later today as we have some technical difficulties on Facebook, so we will be posting a video of this afterwards. Mayor Kenny is unavailable today, so we will begin with remarks from Erica Atwood, Senior Director of the Office of Policy and Strategic Initiatives for Criminal Justice and Public Safety. Erica?
Good afternoon, everyone. Oh, crap. I apologize. My computer just froze. My document just froze. Sorry. There we go. Good afternoon, everyone. As Kevin mentioned, Mayor Kenny is unavailable. I will be updating you on his behalf. Today, you will hear from the police department regarding ongoing efforts to stem violence and apprehend individuals involved in shootings across the city. You will also receive updates from me on the Office of Policy and Strategic Initiatives for Criminal Justice and Public Safety. As always, there will be time at the end of our briefing to answer your questions. With spring on the way and COVID-19 case numbers continuing to trend downwards for the time being, the city is slowly returning to in-person events. With continued option to attend these events virtually for immunocompromised folks, our people who may still be, or people who may still be hesitant around gathering in crowds. We firmly believe that we can only do the work of building safer communities with the partnership of Philadelphians. To foster those partnerships, we need to be together and to see each other, to get to know each other, and to hear from one another. As a part of this return to in-person events, the Office of Policy and Strategic Initiatives for Criminal Justice and Public Safety is excited to announce we are returning the return of our free expungement and pardon clinics led by the Office of Reentry Partnerships in partnership with North 10 and Philadelphia Lawyers for Social Equity. These clinics are for Philadelphians who have a record despite being found not guilty in a case. There will be lawyers and law students present to inform attendees about their rights and options to erase convictions from their record as well. The next clinic will be this Saturday, March 19th from 12 to 2 at the Ledfest Center at 3890 North 10th Street. That's again, it's at the Ledfest Center this Saturday from 12 to 2, and that is located at 3890 North 10th Street. To learn more about the free expungement and pardon clinics, the Philadelphia Lawyers for Social Equity page online is plsephill.org. That's plsephilly.org. Or you can email our community engagement manager at CJPS, Morris Hobson, at Morris, MORRIS.Hobson, HOBSON, at phila.gov. We are also continuing our Roadmap to Safer Communities community listening tour, which have generated meaningful feedback and conversations with Philadelphians around the city's gun violence prevention strategies. We have hosted 2 events so far, one in South Philly and one in Germantown. We are delighted to be back in community and have seen strong attendance at both meetings, highlighting Philadelphians' readiness and eagerness to be involved in the discussion around violence prevention and reduction. Our co-chairs for the roadmap, myself, Dr. Abaya, and Commissioner Outlaw, have been in attendance in these meetings. We have also been fortunate enough to have partnership with our elected officials, such as State Representative Stephen Kinsey and Senator Sharif Street, who have both been partners and in attendance. Meetings are held in a hybrid model with both in-person, capped at about 50 attendees, and virtual attendance hosted through Zoom. The links for the registration can be found on our website. That's phila.gov/CJPS, and will be shared throughout our social media channels at Philly Alive 215. Our next community listening session will be on March 22nd. That's next Tuesday at 6 p.m. at the Martin Luther King Recreation Center in North Philadelphia. We look forward to seeing you all in our continued conversations. And with that, I'll hand it over to Commissioner Outlaw.
Thank you, Erica. This past few weeks, actually, the past several weeks, it's been very difficult for our city with an unconscionable amount of violence taking place. As COVID-19 restrictions are lifted, as you stated, I'm hoping that as a community, we can return to a form of normalcy. So as we slowly ease back into some semblance of regular life, I'm also hopeful that the disconnect that so many of us have felt will lessen and that the desperation that some have felt will begin to dwindle. I want to assure you that the Philadelphia Police Department is doing everything in our power to bring the violence that the city has been experiencing under control. And as I've spoken about on many occasions, we've reworked our deployments using data and intelligence to guide our efforts to increase the number of officers on the streets and by forming task forces to deal with violent crime. We also improved communications between detectives investigating non-fatal shooting incidents and our homicide unit. As Deputy Commissioner Ben Nash, who's our DC over investigations, will highlight during his portion of the presentation, we've seen improvements in both our homicide arrest rates as well as our non-fatal shooting arrest rates. However, I want to make clear that while our deployment efforts have allowed us to effectively clear cases and patrol the streets, the situation is far from ideal. The redistribution of administrative and special unit personnel to uniform patrol is just a short-term solution to a problem that will become much bigger if we aren't able to recruit and retain more qualified officers into our ranks. So on that note, I want to remind everyone that we are currently holding a recruitment drive. We'll be accepting applications until April 1st. So if you or someone you know is interested in becoming a police officer, please visit our website, www.joinphillypd.com for more information or call 215-683-COPS or 215-683-2677 to speak directly with the recruiter. I encourage everyone from all walks of life and all life experiences to apply. If you want to be better, if you want to see better, police, community relations, change it. Work with us to change it. Be the difference that we all want to see in our communities. Your life views and your experiences matter to all of us. Before I turn this over to Deputy Commissioner Joel Dales, who's our Deputy Commissioner over Patrol Operations, I want to make sure that everyone is aware that there's also an open application period for police communications dispatchers right now, as we speak. Since December, we've added over 50 dispatchers to help alleviate some of the overringing issues that our call center experienced last year. Currently, we have a class of 17 dispatchers in training, and we're hoping to add more. So please, if you're interested in becoming a dispatcher, visit the City of Philadelphia's webpage at www.phila.gov and click on Explore City Jobs. The city will be accepting applications for police communications dispatchers until this Friday, March 18th. And like I've stated before, this is one of the most important professions in all of law enforcement. Our dispatchers connect community members with police officers when they need us most. And they are also our lifelines when we're out on the street. And now to provide an update on what we're seeing in our pinpoint grids is DC Joel Dales, our Deputy Commissioner of Patrol. He'll be followed by DC Ben Nash, our Deputy Commissioner of Investigations, and he'll provide updates on some cases that we wish to highlight. DC Dales.
Thank you, Commissioner.
You're welcome.
Pull up the slides, please. Okay, next slide. Okay, I will start with the citywide homicide and shooting victim stats. Looking at the top of the chart, year to date as of March 13th of this year, Philadelphia had 102 homicides and 403 shooting victims. In comparison to last year, homicides are up 2%, 102 this year versus 100 last year, and shooting victims are up 2%, 403 this year versus 397 last year. If you look at the bottom left of the chart, the top three motives remain the same: arguments, drugs, and domestics. I also would like to note that the clearance rate for the homicides is now at 51%. Next slide, please. Okay, this slide shows the citywide homicide and shooting victim stats 2-week comparison from February 28th to March 13th. We had 21 homicides, 65 shooting victims, which include homicides and multiple shooting victims, and 58 shooting occurrences. Shooting occurrences is an incident count where an individual or individuals were shot. So we're basically counting the incidents, not the number of shooting victims. So we're down at 25%. When comparing the current 2-week period, which again is from February 28th to March 13th, with the previous 2-week period from February 14th to February 27th, it shows homicides up 11%, shooting victims down 27%, and shooting occurrences down 25%. Next slide, please. Okay, this slide shows citywide homicides and shooting victims year-to-date percentage change comparison within a 6-week period in 2022. So the orange line represents shooting victims and the blue line represents homicides. So if you look at the left of the chart, it shows the shooting victims and homicides percentages begin to increase during the week of February 7th. During the week of February 21st, the shooting victims peaked at 7%. So as you can see, it's circled in orange, and then began to drop. However, the homicides continued to climb and peaked at 10%, which again is circled at the top in blue, during the week of February 28th, and then dropped to 2% during the week of March 7th. Next slide, please. Next slide. Okay. All right, this slide shows homicides and shooting victims in the pinpoint grids year-to-date percentage change comparison within a 6-week period in 2022. Starting at the left of the chart, it shows a significant percentage change from the week of January 31st, which was at -2%, to the week of February 14th, which was at 63%. During the week of February 21st, the percentages started to decline. However, the shooting victims percentages, as you can see at the bottom, stayed relatively flat within the 6-week period and declined during the week of March 7th. I want to make note that last year, February was the lowest month for homicides. So when compared last year's to this year, we had 13 more homicides this year in comparison to last year. This is why we're seeing an increase percentage-wise in homicides citywide and in the pinpoint grids during the month of February. So if you look at the percentages in March, which is to the far right of the chart, you will see that the percentages are starting to decline. Next slide, please. This slide shows the total VOOF arrests year to date for 2022 from January 1st to March 13th. So far this year, we have made 484 VOOF arrests. This time last year, we had 684 VOOF arrests and 340 VOOF arrests in 2020, which shows an increase in VOOF arrests from 42% when comparing 2022 year-to-date total with 2020, and a decrease in VOOF arrests by 29% when comparing 2022 with 2021 year-to-date totals. Next slide, please. As of March 14th of this year, 1,189 crime guns were recovered in our city. When comparing the total crime guns recovered from January through February in 2022, which is 975, with the total count per year from January to February in 2019 through 2021, it shows that we have currently surpassed these numbers, well, these totals here. So as you can see, the bar above 2019, we were at 710 crime guns we recovered. And then in 2020, we recovered 752. And then in 2021, we recovered 962 in 2021. So as you can see, we are constantly, every year is getting higher and higher in reference to crime guns we're removing off the streets. Next slide, please. So lastly, in reference to the ghost guns, also known as probably made firearms, that were recovered in our city year to date as of 3/14, we are now at 90. Which is a little less than the total number of ghost guns recovered by the end of 2019. So with that, I will now turn it over to Deputy Commissioner Ben Nash, who is the Deputy Commissioner of Investigations, and he will speak about cases we wish to highlight.
Thank you, Joel. Good afternoon, everyone. Today, I'm going to be providing homicide arrest updates, as I normally do on these press conferences. And since our last press conference, we've arrested 10 individuals who are wanted for committing homicides. In addition, I'm going to be featuring fugitives currently wanted for recent homicides. And finally, I'll be touching on some recent carjacking arrests by our officers. And as Police Commissioner Outlaw did mention, and Deputy Commissioner Dales reiterated, our homicide clearance rate at this time is over 51%. It is up nicely from last year, and we are seeing increases in our non-fatal shooting clearances to arrest as well. On the first slide, you can move forward. We're going to have slides of people, as I said, recently arrested for the homicides. We have Victor Ruiz up first on March. It was on March 2nd, 24-year-old Victor Ruiz Jr. was arrested and charged with the shooting murder of 38-year-old Cristina Tosada. The incident occurred on February 19th, 2017 on the 2800 block of North 2nd Street. Victor Ruiz has been in custody in New Jersey since September of 2017 after being arrested for a crime in Camden County, New Jersey that occurred on September 2nd and 2017. We were able to bring him over to Philadelphia after he was released from custody in New Jersey. Next arrest photo will be of Roderick Williams. And on March 4th, 22-year-old Roderick Williams was arrested for the murder of 26-year-old Tyree Worthen. The incident occurred on October the 6th, 2021 on the 5500 block of Elliott Street. The motive for this homicide was believed to be retaliation. Next slide is Davon Hunt. On March 9th, 29-year-old Davon Hunt was arrested for homicide of 33-year-old Jonathan Grimes. This is one thing that was newsworthy on top of being a homicide. This was the first homicide of the year. It occurred on January 1st of this year, 2022, on the 100 block of East Luray Street. I spoke about this incident when I featured two suspects that were wanted for the homicide in the last press conference. And those two individuals remain wanted. That's 31-year-old Raishina Giles and 32-year-old Kamra Marshall. And they've yet to be arrested. They're still wanted. But we have arrested Davon Hunt for that homicide. Next is a photo of Elijah Perilla. And on March 11th, 21-year-old Elijah Perilla was arrested for the murder of 23-year-old Jimmy Rodriguez. The incident occurred on January 23rd of this year on the 4500 block of North 7th Street. Mr. Perilla was featured as a wanted fugitive during our press conference back on February the 16th, and the motive for the homicide appears to be an argument. Next is arrest photo of Nicole Smith. On March 4th, 44-year-old Nicole Smith was arrested for the murder of 50-year-old Raishina Hightower for an incident that occurred on February the 3rd on the 2400 block of North 31st Street. This incident stemmed from an argument, and Ms. Smith pushed Ms. Hightower down concrete steps, which resulted in Ms. Hightower suffering a fractured skull. She later died from her injuries on February the 15th. Ms. Smith has been charged with murder and related offenses. Next, a photo of Dacia Sims. On March 7th, 23-year-old Dacia Sims was arrested for the shooting murder of her boyfriend, 21-year-old Imad Seleman. Incident occurred on February the 7th on the 5900 block of Bennington Street. Murder is believed to have stemmed from an argument. Next is Xavion Johnson. And on March 4th, 20-year-old Xavion Johnson was arrested for the murder of 59-year-old Zhou Zhang Lin. The incident occurred on February 16th on the 5500 block of Whitaker Avenue. The motive for this homicide appeared to be robbery. On the next one is a photo of George Chandler. And on March 1st of 53-year-old George Chandler was arrested for shooting and killing 48-year-old Yarn Harper. The incident occurred on February 22nd on the 900 block of North 68th Street. The victim was the brother-in-law of the offender. Next is a photo of Corey Thompson. This is from an incident that received a lot of media attention. And on March 4th, 23-year-old Corey Thompson was charged with the shooting murder of 69-year-old James Watson. That incident occurred just outside of a bank on March 3rd in the 5700 block of Germantown Avenue. And this incident stemmed from an attempted robbery. Next is a photo of Salim Williams. And on March 10th, 26-year-old Salim Williams was arrested for the homicide of 61-year-old Louis Anthony Graham. The incident occurred on March 9th on the 4800 block of Springfield Avenue. The murder appears to have stemmed from a domestic argument. And next, I'm going to be featuring some individuals that are wanted for recent homicides. The first slide is a photo of Davon Stanley, 27-year-old Davon Stanley. You can flip this slide, Kevin, if you can. Is wanted for the shooting murder of 39-year-old Hameen Gibbs. The incident occurred on August 23rd of 2021 on the 5200 block of Master Street. That arrest warrant was just obtained on March 3rd. Next is Ethan Senbonfeng. 19-year-old Ethan Senbonfeng is wanted for the murder of 25-year-old Akil Afi, who was shot 20 times. The incident occurred on September the 4th of 2021 on the 2400 block of Sheridan Street, and that arrest warrant was obtained on March 8th. Next is a photo of Demir Richardson. 23-year-old Demir Richardson is wanted for the shooting murder of 17-year-old Carissa Bright. Incident occurred on January 14th of this year on the 6500 block of Ross Street. The arrest warrant was obtained on March 14th. Next is Hassan Johnson. 44-year-old Hassan Johnson is wanted for shooting and killing 34-year-old Pablo Infante Perez. Incident occurred January 17th of this year on the 5000 block of Saul Street. The arrest warrant was obtained March 9th. Next is Brandon Brooks. 25-year-old Brandon Brooks is wanted for the shooting murder of 26-year-old Nigel Jones. The incident occurred on March 4th on the 6200 block of Chestnut Street. Arrest warrant was obtained March 7th. And next is a wanted photo of Sean Didymus, 21-year-old. I'm sorry, we might have missed one. I'll have to get, can you go back, Kevin? I'm sorry. Maybe the last one. No, we're missing a photo. I'll have that included in the package to the media. And that was an arrest warrant for 21-year-old Sean Didymus, wanted for the shooting murder of 26-year-old Omar Freeman. Incident occurred on March 6th on the 5900 block of North Norwood Street. Warrant was obtained on March 7th. And as a reminder to everybody, with all these wanteds, anybody has any information about any of the suspects that I've highlighted, please call our homicide unit, 686-3334. That's 215-686-3334. Or they can always call our tip line, 215-686-TIPS. That's 215-686-8477. And now I'm going to be speaking about some carjacking arrests. We all know that has been a problem we've been fighting a lot this year. The first slide, you can move that slide for 910 South 49th Street. And on March 3rd, around 7:40 p.m., complainant had parked her Toyota Camry on the 900 block of South 49th Street. She was approached by an unknown black male who had his hand in his front right pants pocket, leading the complainant to believe the male had a gun. The suspect took the complainant's keys, phone, fled in the Toyota Camry, and less than 10 minutes after the carjacking occurred, alert officers in the 12th District observed the Toyota traveling on Baltimore Avenue and 51st Street. The Toyota took off at a high rate of speed. When the officers flipped their car around, made a U-turn to try and stop the vehicle. The Toyota crashed into a parked vehicle on the 5700 block of Whitby Avenue. The driver of the Toyota exited the vehicle as the officers approached. There was a brief struggle with the suspect, and the officers were able to place the offender in custody. Recovered from the suspect after his arrest was marijuana and crack cocaine. The complainant was brought to the scene, positively identified the suspect as the male who robbed her of the vehicle just minutes earlier. The offender is 13 years old. Yes, I said the offender is 13 years old. The next slide is for an incident that occurred started in the 3800 block of Jasper Street, and it happened on March 5th at 4:20 p.m. Complainant was parked, sitting in his vehicle, 3800 block of Jasper Street, approached by 5 males. One of the offenders pointed a revolver at the complainant, ordered him out of his vehicle. As the complainant exited, another offender struck him in the face. All 5 males got into the complainant's Subaru and they fled. 3 hours later, officers in the area of 2700 Kensington Avenue observed the complainant's Subaru. They knew that it had been stolen hours earlier that day. The vehicle was parked in the 2700 block of Kensington with the engine running. It was occupied by 5 males. As the officers approached the vehicle to initiate an investigation, all 5 males fled on foot in separate directions. Officers gave chase, provided flash information over police radio. And after numerous foot pursuits, police were able to apprehend 3 of the offenders. The complainant was brought to the location, positively identified 2 of the males that were stopped. The offenders are 19-year-old Cameron Love, as well as 2 other males who are aged 16 and 14 years old. Yes, I said 14. The next is a slide from an incident that started in South Philadelphia, and it was on March 6th at 8:30 at night. The complainant was approached by 4 males. One held his waist and stated, "Do not play stupid." The males took the complainant's Volkswagen and fled. Less than an hour later, officers from our highway patrol were in the area of 1400 South 52nd Street. This incident started at 1900 Worthen Street. And in the area of 1400 South 52nd Street, the vehicle had recently been tracked. The officers observed the Volkswagen parked in the gas station, Liberty gas station, with a male standing by the gas pump outside of the vehicle. The male fled on foot upon seeing the officers, and there was another male. After a brief foot pursuit, the officers apprehended the male on the 1500 block of South Wilton Street, and also they recovered from that area the keys to the Volkswagen. Other officers went to the Liberty gas station and stopped a male who was inside of the store who matched the description of one of the offenders. The complainant was brought to that location, identified both of the suspects as the males who robbed him of his vehicles. They were identified as 18-year-old Davon Lucas and 18-year-old Tyree Carter. They were charged with carjacking. The next one is an incident that started in the 7200 block of Algard Street, and it happened on March 7th at 10 o'clock. The complainant had just completed a food delivery on the 7200 block of Algard Street, and as the complainant returned to his vehicle, noticed a white male seated in the driver's seat of the Toyota Yaris. The complainant ran to his vehicle to try to stop the offender. The offender drove off with the complainant hanging onto the side of the vehicle. The complainant indicated he fell off when the offender drove him against a wall. The complainant stated that after he fell off, the offender then made a U-turn, attempted to strike the complainant again, and drove away. The victim suffered injuries to his hands and his knees. On the following day, on March 8th at 1 p.m., officers from the 15th District observed the Toyota Yaris that matched the description of the complainant's vehicle that was taken on March the 7th. It was on the 6600 block of Frankfurt Avenue. The officers stopped the vehicle, detained the operator, a 17-year-old male. The complainant was brought to the location where the stop occurred, positively identified the individual as the male who stole his vehicle and assaulted him just 12 hours prior to the arrest. And our next one and our last one is on March 7th for an incident that occurred 2800 block of Ruth Street. Happened on March 7th at 11 o'clock in the morning. The complainant was parked in his Chevrolet Impala, the 2800 block of Ruth Street, approached by 2 males. One of the males entered the passenger side of the vehicle, pointed a gun at the complainant. The other male opened the driver door, started going through the complainant's pockets. The offender from the passenger door struck the complainant in the head with the gun. The complainant exited the vehicle, ran away. Next day, March 8th at 9:30 in the morning, the vehicle was located 1900 block of Sterner Street. Uniformed officers were sent to recover and guard the vehicle. And while guarding the stolen vehicle, the officers observed a male walking down the street towards the location. When the male observed the police, he turned and began to run. The officers chased after the male on foot, located him in the rear alleyway of 1900 block of Sterner. As the officers approached, the male threw something onto the roof of a nearby building. That 16-year-old male was taken into custody, and the item that he threw was recovered. The item was the key fob that belonged to the stolen Chevrolet Impala. After an execution of a search warrant at the offender's residence, investigators recovered a unique jacket that matched the jacket that was worn by one of the offenders during the carjacking. Investigators were still working to identify the second suspect involved in the carjacking, but this case highlights how we are relentlessly following up on our carjacking investigations. I'm going to finish by saying that our officers are out there making really good carjacking arrests. We have seen a downward trend in our carjacking numbers. We are attributing this to an improvement in 2 things. It's a combination of the great work that's being done by the Carjacking Task Force and all of the police officers who are out there. And we are holding everyone accountable for the carjacking. So combination of our Carjacking Task Force and really great work by our patrol has been resulting in some outstanding arrests. And as the commissioner mentioned, we are seeing an increase in especially in our homicide clearances. And that is also attributable to the outstanding work that our homicide investigators and our non-fatal shooting investigators have been doing. And so with that, I will turn it back over to Kevin at the mayor's office.
Thank you, Deputy Commissioner Nash, and thank you to all of our speakers. We will now move to Q&A for members of the press. Because of limited time, only one representative from each media outlet is permitted to ask questions. Reporters are asked to limit their questions to 2 or fewer today and to coordinate offline. Today, given the time and the hard deadline of 2, we are limiting questions related to the presentations. Armando is also available for Spanish interpretation as needed. If you would like to ask a question, please be sure to use the raise your hand function under reactions. So with that, I will go to Isabel Sanchez of Telemundo 62. Isabel.
Thank you, Kevin. Armando, como te las envié también por el chat, mi primera pregunta es en referencia a esta tendencia que parece estar ocurriendo en la ciudad de adolescentes con armas robando vehículos. ¿Hay algunos números o algo que podamos hablar en específico de esta tendencia preocupante?
The first question from Isabel is in regards to the armed teens that lately have been holding up vehicles in order to steal them in carjacking situations. This is a worrying tendency or trend in the city. What can we tell her?
I will speak on that, and I think that what we can tell the people who are concerned about it, that we're making significant progress. The young teens who are holding up people are being held accountable. And I'm confident that the prosecutors at our district attorney's office are going to ensure that they are held accountable for these acts. And I think that as we are seeing, the numbers are trending down because we are following up on them in the way that we are, and we are using technology as well as forensics. We have a much greater chance of catching them. They will be caught, and then they will be held accountable. If they're juveniles, they'll be in the juvenile system. And if they're adults, they're going to go to big boy jail.
La respuesta que nos da el comisionado Nash es que por supuesto nos preocupa esta tendencia en la comunidad, pero también queremos remarcar de que hemos hecho avances significativos para tratar de hacer que estos adolescentes sean responsables por lo que están haciendo. Estamos apelando a la Fiscalía y a la Fiscalía de la ciudad para que justamente los traigan a enfrentar los cargos que les pertenecen. Vemos que con esto las cifras han bajado y también estamos haciendo un seguimiento, haciendo uso de lo último en la tecnología disponible y también en las ciencias forenses. Por lo tanto, si los ofensores en esta situación son juveniles, van a ser procesados a través del sistema juvenil, y si son adultos, pues van a terminar en la casa grande, es decir, en la prisión para adultos. Gracias.
And if I can, sorry, Isabel, if I could add, I would like to say that we're also looking at preventative measures. We've begun to have conversations about summer planning and how to engage these young people in positive activity before they deviate and get involved in carjacking. And so know that it is top of mind for the Criminal Justice and Public Safety Cluster, along with the Department of Children, Youth and Families, to find ways to find positive activities and relentlessly engage these young people before they get involved with the police department.
Erica nos agrega, además, Erica Atwood, representando al alcalde, de que también estamos tomando medidas de prevención y otras medidas en la planificación para impedir que esto continúe. Estamos tratando de hacer que la gente joven participe de programas positivos y de actividades en las cuales ellos no se metan en este tipo de problemas. Para esto tenemos la cooperación del servicio y el Departamento de Niños y de las familias de la ciudad. Y por supuesto, el objetivo de estas medidas de prevención es impedir de que esa gente joven participe de esas actividades anticipadamente. Gracias.
Gracias, Armando. Y mi última pregunta es a two-part question para también Deputy Nash. De dos casos que ocurrieron ayer, como te lo mencionaba en el chat, el pizza delivery driver que se le robaron el carro con los hijos adentro, imagínate. Y también ha ocurrido ayer un homicidio en el que un hombre llevaba un bebé en un car seat y le dispararon. Esos son los dos casos que, the latest, lo que nos puedan compartir acerca de eso, te agradezco.
Isabel, the next question is for Commissioner Nash, and it's a two-part question. The first question has to deal with the attack on the pizza delivery driver whose children were in the car, and also the case of the gentleman who was shot at while he had a baby in the car seat in the back. What's the latest that you can tell us about that, Commissioner Nash?
Well, the two separate incidents. So let's talk about the carjacking that occurred yesterday, late in the evening. That investigation and that overall response by police was done exactly with all of our, as well as we could hope, with all the tools that we have at our ready. We received information about the vehicle. Our helicopter, TAC Air, was in the air, got a beat on the vehicle that was being driven by the offender, chased that vehicle, was able to provide information to our officers who stayed in close area, close proximity to the vehicle. That vehicle was eventually tracked down. The individual, I'm sorry, let me rephrase. The vehicle was abandoned by the individual. He went into another vehicle, and it was the other vehicle that was being chased by the police. The children that were inside of the original car that was carjacked, they were safe. They were not harmed. There was a struggle with the mother of the children, but she didn't receive any serious injuries. But we were able to identify that the carjacker jumped into another vehicle that had been taken in a previous incident. Our helicopter unit provided the information about where the vehicle was. We tracked it down. We arrested that individual. He's been charged. He is 18 years old. I don't have his name at this moment, but he has been charged. He is an adult. The incident involving the individual in the Northeast that was carrying the child, the baby was not hurt in that incident. That looks like it was a targeted attack on that individual for reasons that are still under investigation. But fortunately, the baby was fine. Unfortunately, the individual who was shot, he died. We're still working on determining what was the cause, but we know that individual was targeted, but it didn't have anything to do with the child. And we're just grateful the child was not harmed.
Tenemos la respuesta del comisionado Nash con respecto a estos dos casos, Isabel. En el primer caso, tenemos la situación en la cual se hizo este secuestro al paso en los autos el día de ayer, muy tarde por la noche, y la investigación está utilizando todas las herramientas a nuestra disposición. Tenemos información sobre el tipo del vehículo que se utilizó y gracias a la ayuda de nuestro servicio de helicópteros hemos podido hacer un seguimiento. Y los oficiales podían seguir este vehículo y lo que termina sucediendo es que el individuo abandonó el vehículo en el cual se encontraba la madre, que fue ligeramente herida, pero el menor no tuvo ningún daño, felizmente. Está sano y salvo. El segundo vehículo se hizo un seguimiento tras el abandono del primero y se arrestó al individuo. Ya se le han presentado cargos. Queremos recalcar que este es un joven de 18 años de edad y por lo tanto va a ser imputado y procesado como un adulto. Con respecto al incidente que ocurrió en el noreste, que también involucró a un menor, a un niño, este niño estaba en el auto, pero felizmente no fue herido, no tuvo ninguna lesión. Nosotros tenemos indicios para pensar de que este incidente tenía como propósito herir y dañar a la persona que eventualmente recibió los balazos y que desgraciadamente ha fallecido. Este caso se encuentra todavía bajo investigación y nosotros vamos a determinar cuál es el vínculo y por qué se utilizó a esta persona como un objetivo. Pero lo que podemos reportar también en este caso es que felizmente el niño está fuera de peligro. Gracias.
Thank you, Armando. Gracias.
A ti, Isabel.
Thank you, Isabel. We'll now go to Kristen Johansson of KYW. Kristen.
Hello. I wanted to see, I don't think you spoke about this, Deputy Commissioner Nash, but do you guys have any update on the 80-year-old woman who was, I guess, accidentally shot? Is there a continuing investigation about where that gun may have been or who had that gun? And
Yeah, that's a good question. Thank you for raising that. We are all grateful the woman is going to survive. Her injuries were non-life-threatening. There were 3 individuals that were inside of the house, and we have been able to identify the individuals that were there. We are working on getting a warrant to arrest the person that, based on our investigation, is responsible for firing the gun that tragically struck the woman in the floor below. But the good news is she's going to be okay. And as far as where the gun came from, we don't have that information yet. We're still working on getting to the bottom of how it is that these individuals came in contact with a gun and then were apparently either playing with it or it accidentally went off. We don't know the full extent of the circumstances yet.
And then my other question was about the triple shooting yesterday in Burrytown. There were 2 teenagers that were injured in that. I know the one was minor. It was in the pinky. But do you guys have any update on that triple shooting? Maybe what happened? Because I understand one of the people went to, I think the woman went to a hospital, drove herself to the hospital. Do you have any summary about that?
Yeah, I mean, the only thing I can say is at this point, it looks like there was a shootout. And the individuals that were struck during the shootout. We're still in the early stages of that investigation. I hope we'll be able to have something more in the near future on that one.
Okay, that was it for me. Thanks.
Thanks, Kristen. We'll now go to Anna Orso of the Philadelphia Inquirer. Anna?
Hi, everyone. Commissioner Nash, you mentioned carjacking, that you were seeing a downward trend in carjacking numbers. Do you have those numbers handy?
I can tell you that at this point, we have slightly over 300 carjackings, which is an increase from last year's numbers. I don't have the exact count, but I can tell you that in the last 4 weeks, we've seen a decrease. We were seeing carjacking numbers that were in the low 30s. We had a few weeks in the 20s, and this past week we were able to get below 20 carjackings for the week. We've had some days where there have been no carjackings, and then we've had some days where they've happened in spurts. With all the arrests, and especially with the activities that were brought under control by the crew that was run by Mr. Akubu, we believe that that's taken a big impact. But we are seeing them trend in the right direction. And I think that eventually I'm not going to say that we're going to be able to eliminate them. It's a national problem. There are many different causes for why things are happening the way they are across the country, but we're going in the right direction.
Okay. And regarding Mr. Akubu, no arrests yet of any of his alleged associates at this point?
No, we've arrested we arrested his 3 of his associates. We've announced that previously.
I apologize.
Yeah. So that entire crew is taken off the street.
Gotcha. Okay, great. Apologize. I was on vacation last week, so I missed that one.
No problem.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Have a good afternoon.
Thank you.
Thanks, Anna. We'll now go to Kelly Rule of Fox 29. Kelly?
Deputy Commissioner Nash, the 18-year-old that you arrested for the North Philly pizza delivery driver carjacking last night, are you looking at the possibility that he was involved in other carjackings, recent ones, and how many and what incidents, if you're able to say?
Yeah, we absolutely are. Thanks for that question, because anytime all the individuals that we arrest for the carjackings, we're always looking at them for having involvement in other carjackings. I do have his name in my hand at this point. 18-year-old Sean Triplett from the 2900 block of West Norris Street in Philadelphia. He was captured not a relatively short distance from his residence area, and the vehicle that he had fled in after abandoning the complainant's minivan was a vehicle that had been taken reported in a carjacking sometime earlier. I don't have the exact time that the previous vehicle had been taken in. I can't say he was or wasn't involved in that previous carjacking, but now knowing what he has been arrested for, we'll be looking at his whereabouts and see if we can connect him to any other carjackings. We'll also be trying to identify any of his associates that may have been responsible. We think that the delivery that happened in North Philadelphia, that was a setup. That the pizza delivery individual was drawn there for the purpose of the carjacking. No indication that they would have known that there were people inside of the car, but it was a really bad idea to take the car especially with the children inside. We're just grateful that nobody got hurt.
Thank you for that. And then Commissioner Outlaw, she's still on the call. I just wanted to see where we're at with identifying the officers involved in the Siderio case.
Hey there, yes, I'm still here. It's still an investigation, an active investigation. So we won't be prepared to say publicly the officer's name, the discharging officer's names until all of that is complete, and we'll be the first ones to let you know.
Lastly, if I'm allowed to ask, we did get a press release about a Georgia homicide suspect that was arrested in Philly, and apparently the gun used in a murder in Georgia was linked to a homicide in Philly, maybe sometime around February 15th. Just wanted to see if you guys could comment on what the homicide was.
Ben, you want to get that?
Yeah, I can, Commissioner. I can tell you that there was an investigation that was handled by multiple jurisdictions, and you've heard the commissioner and myself talk about the work that we do with ballistics matches. We had a ballistics match that corresponded to an investigation that was being conducted down in Atlanta, Georgia area. And earlier this morning, out in West Philadelphia, an FBI team, a SWAT team, arrested an individual. I believe his name has been identified as Mr. Crumpton, Akil Crumpton. He's been arrested. There was a warrant for him for murder in the Georgia area, in Watkinsville, Georgia. And right now, he's in custody as a fugitive. The incident that you're referring to locally, we do have him tied to a local incident, but at this point, he's not being charged with murder. He is going to be charged shortly with weapons offenses, and it's not clear at this point whether those charges are going to be upgraded or not. But he was determined to have been in possession of a gun that matched up with a connection between our shooting incident back in July, and the incident that happened down in Georgia. So it's a just happening investigation. So I don't have a lot more details, but I can tell you that it was in July of 2021 in the 600 block of South 2nd Street. We had our shooting incident, and there was a previous incident that involved the individual down in Georgia. And we're still working to develop all that. We're working closely with FBI, and the ATF was instrumental in bringing this individual into custody.
Thanks so much.
Okay.
Thanks, Kelly. We'll now go to Madeline Wright of CBS Philly.
Good afternoon. Following up on the 30-year-old man who was gunned down while carrying a baby yesterday in Frankfurt, what advice do you have for residents who are afraid to walk the streets given the surge of gun violence that the city is experiencing?
And I appreciate that question. It's concerning to everybody. There was somebody that was gunned down while in holding and care of a child. But I will reassure the public that was not a random shooting. That was a targeted individual shooting. So people who are going about their life in the city that are not involved in something that would present that kind of a situation, I don't think that they should be worried about that. It's not like anybody walking down the street with a child is going to be shot. The callousness of that incident is overwhelming. I do agree with you. The fact that somebody would take it upon themselves to shoot and kill any human being who is in holding on to an infant child is so egregious. It's so outlandish that it shocks the conscience. And we are seeing some of that. But this is not a random act of violence out there. So I don't think this is something where general public needs to be worried about something like that happening.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, Madeline. We'll now go to Rudy Gentile of NBC 10.
Thank you. I'm just wondering, Deputy Commissioner Nash, you mentioned a name in the carjacking, the pizza delivery man, Sean Triplett. Do you mind spelling that name for?
Sure. I've got it as Triplet, 18 years old.
And the first name, is it Shaun or Shean?
Shaun. You were correct the first time.
Okay. And so Triplett was Triplet, correct.
Excellent.
Thank you. And then Commissioner Outlaw, I don't know if you also wanted to weigh in on the just sort of the, I don't know if you'd call it surprising, maybe worrying fact that there were, it seems, if my count is correct, at least 4 teenagers arrested in carjackings in the city just recently.
I think, we've been sharing with you all that the suspects or the people responsible in these arrests very early on, we determined that they were becoming younger and younger. And so while, we had several that were arrested in recent days, I mean, we've also shared the arrests of young people that we've taken in custody before for carjackings as young as 12 and 13 years old. So I don't want to say it's surprising, but it's definitely concerning. It's definitely alarming. We know that young people are also trigger pullers. We also know as such that our victims are also becoming younger, not just of carjackings, but of violent crime in general. And so I think it's important for all of us, and which is why, we do these pressers comprehensively with not just the police department. It's important for all of us to recognize that public safety is an ecosystem. We have to have comprehensive strategies that not only address the enforcement end, but ensuring that there are services and programming for our young people to ensure that we are also addressing the prevention end, which is what Ms. Atwood and her team does. So not surprising, but definitely concerning and alarming.
Thank you, Commissioner.
Thanks, Rudy. We'll now go to Francis Wong of NBC 10.
Hi, I actually had a question about that as well. This is for, Commissioner Outlaw, Erica, or Nash. Is there anything you can give us in terms of like an anecdote or an example? Because, we hear about the prevention measures and how important that is. But is there any scenario with any of these really young teenagers, 12, 13, that you can give us? Obviously, you don't have to give us specific details, but how they got pulled into this, why they got into this. Were they pressured by a family member or a neighbor or someone who convinced them to get into this, or just something a little more specific about why prevention measures are so important?
I'll lead off by talking about how, to the question of how did they get pulled into this? How did they get started in this? I think that people who study this from academia and from journalism are seeing that the pandemic was a driving force, that there were people who were cooped up in homes or didn't have school, didn't have outlets, didn't have recreation centers to go to. Bad things started happening in numerous areas. And I think that what we see in our society today is something that happens in one part of the country. It doesn't take years to move across the country. So I think it was starting in other places, and I'm not saying it wouldn't have come here no matter what, but the social media has been driving it. And there was a headline I think it was in a New York Times story or a recent journalist story that said they think it's a game. And I think it's a sad indictment of today's society with some youths that don't understand the severity that what they're doing is life and death, and it can ruin their life as well as the people, the impact that it has on the victims. So to the question of what gets them into it, I think that only they and their parents and their family can ask that. I think that with a strong family support network, they're not going to be doing that. But I think that too many of our children have gotten lost. And as the commissioner continues to talk about it, we're finding our victims, our offenders and our victims as being younger and younger. And both Commissioner Outlaw and myself, we share the sense that social media has dramatically upended our society, and it's driving things in a lot of ways, hopefully better, but there are negative sides to social media. There's a competition, there's talk, there's braggadocio. We find that they are talking about what they're doing on social media. And I'm not just talking about the carjackings, but very, very specifically, we find that in a lot of our homicide investigations, there is specific talk to others on social media, on different platforms, as if it's a trophy they're holding up. Look what I did, and it's all bad things. So I think that we need a better community support network, and we need outlets for youths to be able to have something to do besides turning to a life of crime.
Yeah, so I'll speak on that as well. So talking about the systemic issue and kind of root causes for violence, to Deputy Commissioner Nash's point, collective efficacy or the lack thereof in neighborhoods, the sense of belonging, connective tissue in neighborhoods, is one of the drivers of violence. And that's what we're seeing. That is as a result of people not knowing their neighbors, or of displacement that we're seeing as a result of gentrification in some neighborhoods. And there's data that supports that. And so that's kind of what you're seeing. And so these kids are looking for a sense of belonging. And we have to just find ways and outlets. I mean, I think about myself when I was 12, 14, 13 years old. I did dumb stuff, and we all kind of do dumb stuff. At this age, at the access that young people have to certain tools and equipment of harm and instruments of harm is what the big difference is. And so it's removing those instruments of harm, giving them a safe place to be, continuing to engage them in positive activity and providing them with other opportunities for belonging. Part of that is the work that Department of Human Services is doing around intensive prevention services. And so intensive prevention services. And so there's a whole program in neighborhoods, particularly targeting young people like the ones that we see who are getting caught up in these with guns, carjackings, other kind of criminalized behaviors. What we have to do is start directing them to the programs and supports that exist, that are actually underutilized, that are specifically built for these young folks. And so letting community know that these programs exist, providing them an opportunity to plug in when the neighborhoods in which these kids live, work, and play is really important, and getting help from you all as a media to promote those opportunities for kids to be involved in positive activity as a choice and an intervention to what we're seeing with these young folks in the carjackings.
That was great. Thank you so much, Erica, and I don't want to say Benjamin, Deputy Commissioner Nash.
All right, thanks, Francis. We will now go to, I think we have time for one more question before we have to wrap up. So we'll go to Perilla Lara of Impacto.
Hola, Perla.
Hola, ¿qué tal? Pues sí, dentro del contexto del mes de la herencia de la mujer, de la historia de la mujer, esta pregunta es para la comisionada y es respecto a cuántas mujeres forman parte de las policías y detectives en sí, las personas que trabajan directamente como policías, y qué ayuda le están dando específicamente a las mujeres para que su trabajo sea lo más efectivo y también safe posible.
This question is for Commissioner Outlaw in light of the celebration of Women's Day recently on the 8th of March. The question is, how many police officers and detectives are women in the Philadelphia Police Department? And specifically, what sort of help is being given to them in order for them to do their job?
Sorry, I couldn't get myself off mute. Thank you for that question. The national average of women in law enforcement typically hovers around 12 to 13%. And here we're a little bit over 20%, around 22% or so. And we joined a group of other agencies across the country in something called the 30 by 30 initiative, where we are pledging that through very intentional and strategic actions here in the department, that we will reach the goal of having 30% of leadership and membership throughout the department be women by the year 2030. So as such, you can go to, there's a website, we'll make sure we push that out as well. But there's very strategic objectives by ensuring that not only are we being intentional with how we promote internally, making sure we have the right people in the right seats and making sure that there's representation in the right seats, because we know that representation matters, but then also ensuring diversity in our recruitment efforts as well. So it's important to not only again, be forward facing and allow people to be or see what they can be, but also ensuring on the back end when there are complaints made, for example, of harassment or discrimination or anything that will fall under the realm of equal employment, that those allegations are taken seriously, and therefore our zero tolerance for harassment and discrimination is reflected in our policy and the decisions that are made by leadership here in the department.
La respuesta que nos da la comisionada Outlaw es que efectivamente te agradece primero, Perla, por la pregunta que has hecho, y el promedio nacional de presencia femenina en los agentes del orden se da del 12 al 13% y en Filadelfia nos encontramos un poquito por encima del 20%, en un 22% actualmente. Sin embargo, nuestro objetivo al año 2030 es incrementar estas cifras y por lo tanto tenemos una iniciativa que se llama la Iniciativa 3530, en la cual nos hemos aunado a otras agencias nacionalmente para justamente incrementar la presencia femenina y nuestro objetivo para Filadelfia para esa fecha es de un 30%. Y no solamente promover a la mujer en posiciones de liderazgo y presencia, y esto lo pueden ver en el sitio web que tenemos, sino también a través de estrategias y objetivos para promover internamente y poner a la persona correcta en el puesto correcto, independientemente del género, teniendo en cuenta que tenemos que tener diversidad también en los procesos de reclutamiento de candidatas para la Academia de Policía. Es importante cambiar la percepción de la gente y, por ejemplo, cuando nosotros tenemos quejas con respecto a acoso de cualquier tipo o discriminación que tengan que afectar el empleo igualitario, que tomamos esos alegatos seriamente. Por lo tanto, queremos que estas cifras se incrementen, lo estamos haciendo y tenemos confianza que más mujeres se unirán a la Fuerza Policíaca de Filadelfia. Gracias.
Thank you, Armando. And given that we are over time, everyone, that is going to conclude today's briefing. We will reconvene again in 2 weeks. Thank you all for joining us. And again, we will post this video online afterwards. So thank you, everyone. Take care.